Howdy humans, well, welcome back to Just Us, guys. Today we have another discussion video, another top 5 video for just random cards that are great with the new archetype. Today we are talking about Holy Knight, or Holy Knights, whatever you want to call them. This is a whole archetype built around a new trained version of the old vanilla monster Seyaru. The new monster is Radiant Seyaru, and it's a pretty cool card, and it's just kind of a cool control strategy that's just kind of built around controlling the board, summoning this card, bouncing it back to hand, summoning it again, and just rotating that time after time. It's a really cool card. If you don't know what it is, when this card is normal summon or special summon from the hand, target one card on the field, destroy it. Nice. Second effect, it can't be destroyed by battle by a dark monster or a dark monster's monster effect. And the last effect, at the start of the damage step, this card attacks an opponent's monster, you can banish that monster till the end phase, and then also declare another attack in a row. So a lot kind of going on there, but we don't really need to go over the whole archetype. The main thing to keep in mind is this is the central pillar of the archetype. Without this, the archetype does absolutely nothing. So keep that in mind. We're going to move forward with our top 5. The first card I want to talk about here is Lina. Lina, the Light Charmer. She's a new card that's revealed for Lightning Overdrive, which I know will be a little bit after the release of Ghost from the Past, which we're expecting Holy Knights to be in. But it's still a very cool card that I'm sure a lot of people want to tech in. Just a really cool generic link monster that allows you to reborn your opponent's lights in grave, and there's even extra like synergy there. I mean, think about the ability to maybe reborn a light Exceed, attack with it, and then overlay for your own Zeus that you have in your extra deck. That could work, as well as doing stuff like reborning an Ecclesia from your opponent's graveyard, and maybe you might just play Dogmatic of Punishment because this deck really doesn't use its extra deck all that much. Then you use your opponent's Ecclesia to search for your own punishment, getting you an awesome, powerful disruption on top of that. So really cool extending card. You won't go into it that often, but that's why it's number 5 on the list, so not that worried about it. So really cool card, has a lot of cool synergies. It's going to be all over the place once it comes out. I can almost guarantee you that any deck that can generically summon this really easily will definitely play this card. Next up, Barrier Statue of the Heavens. Now this is going to have synergy with something we see a little bit later on in the list. That's kind of the big obvious one, I think, for the strategy, but this card cannot be ignored in this deck. If you don't know what the barrier statues do, they all lock both players out of special summoning any monster except if it's the attribute of the barrier statue itself. So Heavens is a light, which means neither player can summon anything but lights. Now I know lights isn't the worst thing. I know like Barrier Statue of the Storm Winds right now is like super popular in Leerlust Tri Brigade, but and like wind isn't a super played attribute, and light's a little bit more seen. I mean, especially with like Drytron and stuff, but it does keep them from going into a lot of their extra deck stuff, which is fairly nice there. All I'm saying, it's not the best thing in the world, but it may be a one-of because you can tutor it out with other ways, and this does seem to be a very control-y kind of stunny-ish strategy, so I wanted to throw him in to kind of consider with that. So there you go, Barrier Statue of the Stormwind, very cool card in the deck. Next up is Honest. Now this card kind of goes hand in hand with Barrier Statue because we'll talk about the card later on, which kind of coincides with both of these, making them both very cool. But Honest is really cool in the strategy. A lot of your Holy Knight cards are pretty small other than Seyaru, and you don't want to risk your opponent ever beating over Seyaru. If you're going to summon it on their turn to pop something, you don't want them to just summon something big and beat over it. So I do want that capability of having Honest as an insurance plan. And it kind of just like, once you flash it once to your opponent, they should always be scared of it. They should always be wary. If you have an unknown card in the hand, they may just be like, if it's Honest, I really do just put myself in a terrible position by attacking. And so you can scare them off by bluffing certain things, which is very cool. So yeah, Honest, number 3. Also, one thing, keep in mind, with the other card we'll talk about later, when he is summoned out, you can actually just bounce him to the hand. So there are other ways to just like return to the hand, so he's almost searchable in that regard. So you actually don't need to play a full 3 of him. Yes, your opponent will know that you have him locked and loaded, but it still scares them out of the battle phase regardless, and that's the main goal. So yeah, Honest, number 3. Number 2, we have Bahartia, the Sky Piercer of the Light. This is a really interesting card in this strategy. I went through a list as soon as this archetype came out, because if you go through the cards in this archetype, they actually don't specify Radiant Sayaru. They actually all specify any level 7 light dragon specifically. So nothing too crazy, but it means that there's a little bit of generic room in there. If we can find any good other light level 7 dragons, we could get in there. Bahartia actually happens to be one. Now this card is also coming in Lightning Overdrive alongside Lina, the Light Charmer. So keep in mind it will come out a little bit after, but it's a cool card. This card essentially allows you to, I know because the text is all Japanese there, it allows you to tribute summon itself on your opponent's turn when they add a card from their deck to the hand, except for drawing for turn. And when he summons, he actually can what is it? It's banish the amount of cards off the top of your opponent's deck equal to their hand size. Then they shuffle their hand back into the deck, and then you add the banish cards back into their hand. So they kind of just swap their hand for the top cards on their deck, essentially. And that can come up. I mean, listen, it's 2021. Konami's making a ton of once per turn cards. So a deck like Dogmatica or Invoked, just in Dogmatica Invoked, they just keep activating these cards like Nadir's Servant, Magical Meltdown, Terraforming, right? Like hard once per turn cards. Terraforming is not a hard once per turn, but it gets that in Meltdown, right? So they activate these hard once per turn cards to search specific cards, and then you can hit them with this guy, which then will essentially just swap those cards back into their deck. Now they do have a chance to just draw. It's not a -1 for them at all, really. So that's the downside. But if they just threw into like another Meltdown and didn't draw an Alistair again, then they're kind of just sitting there like, now I can't activate my second Meltdown. That's a dead card in hand. I don't have an Alistair, and so I'm kind of in a little sticky pickle. So there is some plus side to it. I don't think it's a card that you need to play absolutely, but maybe it's one of. It's searchable. It can be summoned out via the Holy Knight cards. It doesn't even need its own effect to pop off, because it actually does have to quick tribute itself by tributing one effect monster, which is kind of annoying that you have to give up another card for it. But it can be useful as a one-of to have this on top of maybe something like Sayara. So you have the Dryden effect plus the ability to mess with your opponent's hand after they've already searched some things out. That's all I'm saying. I just want to make that clear. So that is it for number 2. He's a really cool card. I think he's interesting. I don't think I'd play him as more than a one-of, but hey, he's got use. I definitely think he has potential use. So, and we definitely have to keep an eye out for any future level 7 light dragons. Keep your eye on that. Anytime one gets revealed, you know you got to reference Holy Knights and see how good it is in the deck. And then lastly here, we have just the best card in the deck. That's what this is going to be. This is going to be a Ties of the Brethren type deck. This card's insane. All of the Holy Knights are level 4 light fairies. There's actually a fairly good amount of level 4 light fairies. We already talked about 2 of them, by the way, and that's what I wanted to reference with Ties of the Brethren. Is if you don't know what this card does real quick, you pay 2,000, you target a level 4 lower monster on your field, then you summon 2 monsters with the same type, level, and attribute from your deck, but with different names. So you have any Holy Knight on the field, you can target it, pay 2,000, then summon an Honest, then summon a barrier statue. What's particularly cool about that is because then you can bounce the Honest back to your hand with his own effect, and now you have an Honest which now protects your barrier statue. If your opponent's playing anything that cannot work, that cannot like play without while under barrier statue's restriction, they are just straight up screwed. It's over, and they can't even walk over it because we have Honest in hand that we just searched essentially. So very, very cool combo you can do there. You just get a ton of like resources. The only thing I would complain about with this card really is that the Holy Knight search monster, like the in archetype Stratos, only gets a search on normal summon. Unfortunately, he does not get his search on special summon. So if you had something like maybe you open Barrier Statue or Honest or any of the other Holy Knights that aren't like big, like good starter ones, Unfortunately, summoning him out of the deck does not help you search one of your spell or trap cards, so you don't get a huge plus off of that, but you do still get 2 monsters off of 1 card regardless. So sometimes just summoning Barrier Statue with Honest can be enough by itself without even getting into the Sayaru play, which is really important to keep in mind that your entire deck is light, so you literally can do everything under this card. You can still special summon Sayaru on your opponent's turn to pop a card, and a lot of times that's just going to be it. Type lock like that while dealing with the Dryden is really tough for a lot of decks to beat. So this card has to be the best card in the deck, and I will leave it off there. That's the top 5. But the one thing I want to mention here is there were a couple other cards that I wanted to mention here, and those cards are just other. I guess the counter fairy core, right? We have stuff like the Valkyria monster, where like if any monster, I think, is it monster spell or trap effect or activation is negated, you can just like show your opponent 3 counter traps and then just like randomly add 1 to hand, the rest go back to deck. It's something like that, but it essentially gets you another counter trap. You also have Bountiful Artemis. When a counter trap is activated, draw 1 card. Nice. And then I think there's one more, like Guiding Ariadne isn't a terrible card. It just has more like counter trap synergy. I just wanted to reference that as another possible way the deck can go, because that deck played Ties of the Brethren, and it didn't just play Ties of the Brethren, it played Ties of the Brethren with a light level 4 fairy core. So that could actually be ginormous, right? Like for the deck. So it's just another thing to mention. I just wanted to throw it out there that there is the possibility of playing like a small counter fairy core with a decent amount of counter traps, because this is already a stun strategy anyway, with like Barrier Statue and just trying to like set up a control / stun strategy. You could even play Goza Match. I mean, if you can play Barrier Statue of the Heavens, why not? Like, why is Barrier not Barrier oh my, Gozen Match like so out of the question, right? Still locks your opponent into 1 type, and that could still be very good. So I just wanted to mention those. I do think the possibility of just playing like counter traps plus the fairy core, like a small counter fairy core, could also be pretty good in the deck with Ties of the Brethren. So just wanted to mention that real quick before we go. But other than that, guys, that's going to do it here. Let me know in the comment section down below. I really did give a good amount of time looking at cards, but maybe there's something I missed. There can always be something I missed. I felt like generic fairy support, as you can tell, like none of these are specifically like, oh, like synergy with a fairy. It's mainly light synergy, just because like the generic fairy support cards just aren't really as good, unfortunately. So I didn't feel like any of them really deserve to be on the list. But if you feel differently with any card, you feel like any other card should be on here and should be considered when playing the deck, absolutely throw that in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on that. But other than that, I'm gonna get the hell out of here. Thank you so much for watching. As always, guys, I will catch you in the next video. Subscribe if you haven't and you want to see more shiz like this in the future. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.